All right, we have one of the censored voices joining us again on YouTube, ROKFIN, and Rumble, live on all three platforms. And as usual, I'm going to just give the pitch. Well, we have people on who can practice medicine legally, but they can't talk about anything on YouTube that they think, because apparently the bar is higher to talk about medicine on YouTube than it is to practice medicine in the United States, or I don't know, anywhere else for that matter. So Dr. Dhnd's here. This is his second time on. He's got a YouTube channel where he recently posted a video called Hello Again, Everybody, down here somewhere. Oh, yeah. Hello again, everyone, from Dr. Dhand. And basically, you're explaining why you have taken a 3-month break. You're back now, but you're explaining in this video why you took a 3-month break. Let's start there. What happened, generally speaking, and then we're going to go into detail on the other platforms once we cut the YouTube stream.
Sure. Well, hi, Alison. Thank you for having me again on your show, and a big hello to everyone else. And that was a great introduction. I couldn't have put that any better myself, in terms of how difficult it is now to live in a time where practicing medicine at the front lines and actually being able to say what you want in an online arena have different degrees of allowances in terms of what you're allowed to say, and even to a degree think. So to go over exactly what happened then to me, I was in a situation where I had made a lot of YouTube videos. In fact, I've been on YouTube for some time, and my area of interest is preventive medicine, wellness, metabolic health. That also actually does link to a lot of what we've seen during COVID, but a lot of my videos during the last 18 months or so have been focused on the COVID pandemic, because of course, everybody has been thinking about that first and foremost. And I had some trouble for some time with some of my videos, if, for instance, they were going over information or news which may have not been to the correct narrative, as it were, even though I pride myself on always presenting scientific information, throwing things out to an open debate, which is what science is all about. It's not about censorship and control of a narrative. So I'd received some warnings before from different platforms, but obviously we're talking about YouTube, and I had submitted appeals which had been accepted. But then I got myself into a situation where, despite presenting real scientific data and actual news stories, YouTube had got into a pattern of censoring and removing my videos repeatedly, despite my appeals. I was in a situation in March where I had this channel and I was enjoying all of my videos, making them, the great interactions I had. People were communicating with me all the time on and off my platforms. But I was in a situation where YouTube had essentially issued me 2 strikes. So their rules, for those of you who are not familiar with it, they have a policy whereby if you get 2 strikes and despite your appeals, they are rejected, if you get a 3rd strike, you will immediately disappear. Your channel will close down. So they had put me in an absolutely impossible situation whereby I knew that they were arbitrarily removing videos for no reason at all. And we will get into this more in the future, because actually, Alison, I think that they're going to be in big trouble very soon. All it's going to take is a change in political headwinds, and we will come to that. But anyway, they were arbitrarily removing my videos for no reason. I was appealing and saying, you cannot remove this. This is scientific data and real news. They had 2 strikes against me. So in usual circumstances, you would be banned from uploading for a certain amount of time. I had 2 strikes. So if I faced another strike, I would immediately disappear. So what did I want to do? Did I want to give YouTube the power of essentially closing me down on this channel that had all of these followers and people enjoyed watching my videos, and I would just disappear, sort of Third Reich style or communist era Soviet style, just disappear from the platform?
Oh. Oh, you're muted, Dr. Dhand. Something muted you. It was actually perfect timing, because you're like, well, should I just disappear? You're like, I just disappear from the platform, and then you went black with the microphone turning off. It was like it was planned. Or YouTube's on you. They're like, you know what? We're gonna cut this guy off before he can keep going.
When I'm getting
Sorry, continue.
Okay. So I was in an impossible situation. Was I going to give YouTube the power of allowing me to just disappear, or was I going to lead the way, put out a final video and say, look, goodbye from me, my channel is closed. So I did that, and people were upset. People were feeling, in a way, I don't want people to feel sorry for me, but I think many people did and thought, here's somebody who's just trying to tell the truth and engage in discussion and is faced with this repeated censorship from his country, in a way, because of course we should make no mistake, this is being directed by more than just the forces of big tech. So I put out that video, and the rules of YouTube are that if you don't get any strikes for 3 months, then they're essentially wiped. So you have a clean slate, almost like being a criminal. So your convictions get wiped and you can start again. So that's what I did. March, April, May, June. End of June, I said hello again, and I started up again because I have a clean slate on YouTube. Ridiculous that I would actually even be in this situation. And it's more than just sort of a funny case of wronged censorship. There are bigger issues at play here, which are, I'm sure, going to come to the forefront in the future. But that's essentially where I was. Long answer there to your question, but I wanted to go over it in its entirety. That's why I disappeared for 3 months.
And did you tell your audience that you were going somewhere?
No, I said I was closing my channel because I had to be prepared for the fact that YouTube, because my channel was still active, they were in this pattern where I was shocked. They'd issued me 2 strikes within the space of 2 weeks. And I thought, this is it. I could just disappear. So I may as well just say goodbye, so that if, this all ends, I've said my goodbyes to my audience. They know that I closed my channel, and I said it was because of censorship. I used that example. Now, that didn't happen, and here I am now 4 months later.
Okay, so you did post a video where you just told people, hey, I'm not going to be here for a few months.
Oh, yes. So if you go back to the video before, I had posted a video saying I was closing my channel and saying goodbye.
Okay, right here, YouTube banned Dr. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, for misinformation, yeah.
So in the meantime, when you're taking your sabbatical, your YouTube sabbatical, are you is your license suspended to practice medicine? Are you still working with patients? What's happening in the real world? Is it paralleling what's happening on YouTube, or is it totally different?
Oh, no, of course. They're 2 separate worlds completely. I've got multiple state licenses, and I work. I thankfully do enjoy my jobs, and I previously used to do outpatient work as well, mainly inpatient now, but I carry on practicing. This is a separate issue from anything to do with the medical practice that I am in. So I'm very busy with that. And I'm also in the online world. I stayed on an uncensored platform, which you're familiar with as well, locals.com. Continue to post videos over there. And I'm on other social media platforms as well. It was YouTube where I actually had my biggest following that I had this issue with. And I'm very confident that I would never have any issues with my medical practice, because nothing I have said has ever been misinformation. Because nobody, not even YouTube, when I said, look, you're doing all of these things to me, tell me what the medical misinformation is so that I know what is it that is medical misinformation. Nobody can ever tell me what it is. It's just the fact that you are encouraging discussion and you're putting forward data which the authorities don't like to hear. I mean, what kind of science is that, for goodness sake?
That was another question I had for you, is how are you communicating? You have at least, I know that for those of us who are over 100,000 subscribers, I don't know what the special privilege is, but I've heard we're supposed to be able to somehow communicate with somebody in flesh at YouTube, though I've had not really any success doing any protest of any kind other than going to Twitter and just getting a bunch of people to retweet that I got suspended and they should let me back in. And that's been the only successful method at this point, which really is depressing, because for people who don't have the ability to build some kind of Twitter battle against YouTube, then you have no recourse whatsoever. How did you try to protest, throughout all of these? What has been your method to try to reverse the decisions?
So I follow the rules of big tech platforms like everybody has to. And I've had some issues with Facebook as well that have wrongly removed and censored some of my posts which were actually sharing journal articles. I didn't even comment on them. Journal articles that Facebook corrupt US big tech. I should also add, I don't say US big tech as one word. I always add corrupt before because I think they are very corrupt. Corrupt US big tech has decided to censor. They didn't like it. I've had a similar issue we talked about last time on LinkedIn, where the authorities decided they didn't like certain news stories that were being told. I mean, this is absolutely shameful. It really is. And I'm also coming back to the medical community. I'm quite ashamed of the medical community. I mean, that's a whole different topic. I could talk for hours, but when you look at it historically, maybe it's not that surprising. But the medical community, when I had my first video initially censored, this was at the end of last year, which was a well-respected scientist and an editor of a major medical journal talking on Capitol Hill. Big tech, corrupt US big tech, decided to censor that information. I mean, this is awful. And I even said at the time, how is the medical community not up in arms about this? I guess a certain narrative has kind of developed, and I think it's more of an issue, to be honest, in the United States than in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, as many problems as it has had, and people over there will complain too. I mean, every country has its own issues. I feel like in the United States, physicians and physician organizations are much more in lockstep with the narrative, whereas in the UK, you have a lot of dissent. So I'll give you an example with the vaccine mandates. Not a single US physician organization stood up and said, this is wrong from a purely ethical standpoint. But many UK organizations, the Royal Colleges, actually stood up and said, yes, vaccination programs are fine. We can encourage vaccination, that's fine. But vaccination mandates are completely different and they are wrong ethically. Many said that. Not a single US physician organization said that. I, for one, will never forget that or actually forgive US physician organizations for not questioning these very obvious things. So coming back to the fact that medical information is being censored to such a big degree and not a single US physician organization is standing up and voicing concern, I think it's disgraceful. I think it's shameful, and it's really put me off from wanting to be any part of any organized physician group. That's very different from hospitals and healthcare facilities. I'm talking about the organized groups here, which we can talk about this for a long time, have their own conflicts of interest. But not one of them stood up and said, hold on, this isn't how science is conducted. Why do I, Alison, have to be a lone voice here, sitting here, standing up for very obvious, true things? It shocks me. And then I get all these people behind the scenes who contact me and say, yeah, you're actually right. We totally agree with you, but they won't speak out. How often have we seen that situation throughout history?
Right. Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned over the last few years, I don't even know if it's learned, I just confirmed for me that I've always believed that we have the same dynamics working in society that they would have had 100 years ago. The content might be different.
Yeah.
The stuff that you see within the context or the system might be different, but the psychological dynamics and the way people act in groups and that kind of thing, I think probably stays with us as a species. I don't know. That's just, but sitting back and thinking about different points in history, like you're discussing, you know, I've always thought it would take a stretch of the imagination to think that we've somehow evolved past the point of being able to repeat those eras of history. Like we still carry with us that ability. It just would look differently. And I think what this has confirmed for me is that that's the case. Like you can totally see how it may look different. I mean, we might not do, I'm trying to be careful with what I say, but we may not target people or suppress information in the same ways. Like we may not go out and actually physically burn books, for instance, but we're doing it in our own technological way these days. Okay, in a second, I want to ask you about if you think when you're talking about the medical profession and doctors not sticking up for each other, sticking up for science the way that you would like to see them, do you think it's because they truly believe in the narrative, as you say, and they think honestly people should be silenced? Or do you think they do believe something wrong is happening, but they're just too scared to speak up. I want to hear what you think about that in a second. Don't forget, everybody, though, that you can go support my work at AllisonWinePromo.com. You get 50% off my favorite Malbecs from Argentina. These are high-altitude Malbecs from very remote regions. One comes from a small operation where they handpick the grapes. Another uses natural fermentation. And the third comes from almost 9,000 feet. I think I may have already said that. But anyway, they're very robust. They go great with summer grilling season. So if you like that kind of stuff, don't forget AllisonWinePromo.com. 50% off the wine itself and 50% off shipping. You can also go to TwinEngineCoffee.com/Allison and pick up some organic coffee roast from Nicaragua. There's light roast, there's dark roast, and there's also Caturra tea. If you like tea, this is tea made from the coffee fruit. I like to cold brew mine for 24 hours. Add some lemon. It's very good, but you can hot brew it too if you like that as well. The owner of the company lives right there in Nicaragua, where they do everything. They grow, harvest, roast the beans, a lot of local jobs, and a great operation. I love being part of it. Small family-run business. So check out TwinEngineCoffee.com/Allison as well. Okay. So, oops, didn't mean to take you out of there. Take
That's
over the
okay.
show. So
I'll second that. I actually like red wine too,
and
I've been to Argentina, so I'm persuaded as well. That's a good
okay,
combination.
yeah,
Argentinian red wine.
I was gonna say maybe subconsciously I took you out because I was like, I don't want to hear what Dr. Dan as an internal medicine doctor thinks about my wine and my coffee and wine promos. But no, I'm just kidding. I didn't. So tell me what you think about the doctors. Like, do you think they're consciously aware of the fact that they're just, I mean, it really, to me, it feels like, because I agree with you. I mean, my bias is obviously that I agree that there should be robust discussion about this. And I think it's been very problematic what we've seen over the last couple of years. So I think they're weenies. I mean, frankly, I think they're being weenies. But on the other hand, I try to put myself in the position of thinking, well, maybe they're not scared. Maybe they really believe this narrative. Like I had a guy on not too long ago who is, he was a professor of biology, I think, or chemistry. And he then takes a totally separate venture, works in Hollywood, produces movies. And he's been published now in like MedPage Today, very establishment, publication, saying that all they need is to, all the government needs, for instance, to get the response that it should be getting from the public, which is like, do what we say. And he believes that they should basically be doing that, is just change the narrative. Like the problem is the communication from the government. It's not the science itself. And so he's like, he really believes that. Like he believes the science gets an A, it's just the communication gets an F. I think both get an F. I think that there hasn't been good, robust science done in this era either. And but I look at him and I'm like, he's not sitting there thinking, I really know there's this other stuff going on. He thinks there's too much information. And the government really needs to do even more to have a narrative officer and whittle it down. So do you think doctors are like him, where they're like, no, yeah, exactly. The science is great. We just have too much information that's confusing the public or we have these dissenters like Dr. Dan who just need to be silenced. Or do you think they know deep down that this is problematic for science, but they're just too scared to speak up?
I think those are a great series of questions. And you touched on so many points. And that person you described there goes probably our future director of the CDC, I'm sure. He's that kind of mentality. I mean, that's an awful mentality to have. And there's so many reasons why I believe that doctors and the medical profession in particular have been afraid to speak up historically. Members of it have not spoken up when they've seen something that it doesn't make sense. And they haven't been as critical thinking as one would expect. And I think it goes right back to the beginning of how doctors are trained. If we think about this, Allison, so right from the very beginning of medical school, it's a learning fact mentality. And this is something which needs to be corrected and needs to be corrected fast, especially in today's day and age. Doctors are not trained to critically think. Doctors should be trained when they get information, rather than the current structure of most doctors out there will just hear what the narrative is from their leading societies and just follow it like robotically. They won't check the studies themselves. They won't ask very obvious questions about it. They aren't trained to really tear apart data and critically think. And this is a huge, huge problem. I'll give you a simple example. after the initial vaccine studies came out, December 2020, yeah, and then the vaccine was released shortly afterwards. I actually read the studies. I went through them all, and I had very obvious questions, and I absolutely saw what was going to unfold just simply from critically thinking. And I said this, and of course, at the time, there was this sort of hysteria. Yes, we're going to eradicate this illness. And I said, I would ask doctors around me, have you read the study? And I'm very sad to say, Alison, the vast majority had not. And even now, if I ask them, still have not. And I'm thinking, here is the most important medical story probably of your lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
How could you be in our field and not have even read the studies and be promoting something and not realize from the studies that things were going to unfold as they have? That's one reason why I think doctors are not as critically thinking as they should. Maybe it's a rare trait. I know I'm not alone. I know there are doctors. I have colleagues that think exactly like me, but it does feel like the minority sometimes. I think it goes back to how doctors are trained, and we have a hierarchical structure where we just accept orders, what is given to us from above, without asking very obvious questions. I could give a whole other talk on basically old wives' tales that we practice in medicine and are said by doctors in their hundreds of thousands as if they are gospel truth. And there's never been any evidence to it at all. Nobody has asked obvious questions. That's the first reason. I'd say the second reason is that there is an atmosphere of a lot of fear out there, especially in circumstances like we've seen over the last 2.5 years. And this could apply to any situation which becomes a quote unquote emergency. And it's more easy to proliferate that feeling now with 24/7 mainstream media, big tech, smartphones, etc. And there is a fear that if you step out of line of the narrative, because there will always be a narrative in a situation like that. That's, again, coming back to the science of human psychology. And if you dare step out of that, then you risk the mob coming after you. Now, I'm in a fairly unique position, maybe, where I am independently practicing as a physician. I have multiple state licenses. I have zero interest, Alison, in ever being part of an academic institution. I don't have any interest in progressing up a physician committee. I'm not interested in those power structures whatsoever. I'm free of them. So I can talk my truth much more freely, maybe. But nevertheless, it still disappoints me that supposedly intelligent people, I know so many who have felt the same way as me, stayed completely silent throughout. And there will always be excuses, as there will be for any situation in life. Oh, I've got the job, I've got a family, I really rely on this. I just don't want to shake things up. I can't be bothered. Those excuses will be there in any situation. And maybe they help people sleep at night. But I say this, you're only going to live once. You're on your own spiritual journey. Imagine during the most critical situation in your life, you saw something that was wrong and you stayed silent. You will have to tell your grandchildren that one day. And it might be rare for people to be brave and speak up. But to me, I consider this as well a spiritual journey in a way. I've seen things, I've spoken the truth, I've suffered the consequences, but I would far rather do that and know that I can sleep better at night than stay completely silent if I see nonsense going on around me and bad forces, bad agendas take hold, which I recently spoke about in a video about how I felt I'd been red-pilled over the last 2.5 years. So there again is a long answer to the question, but I think there's multiple different reasons why the medical profession historically, because this is not the first time, stays completely silent during times when they should speak up.
I would say even before this, I was starting to become very aware that many doctors were decent at what I would call battlefield medicine, you know, if you had an emergency or something, but that when it comes to chronic problems or like the stuff you look at, metabolism, nutrition, stress, you know, that kind of thing, that they seem to be very ill-informed about a lot food. I mean, nutrition was one thing that I could probably run myself circles around the average doctor when it comes to nutrition just on my own, you know? So when it comes to this stuff, like we've seen over the last couple of years, I guess it doesn't surprise me that they're ignorant of a lot of what you just discussed. What surprises me more, I think, is the hubris while ignorant. Like, even in my old profession of mainstream television news, it would be one thing if you just admitted, I don't have the time to read the research. I'm not totally sure this is the best I could do. Make the decision for yourself, or like just be honest. I didn't read the research. I don't really know. What bothers me is the pretense of knowledge and then the hubris that comes with it, in conjunction with then trying to shut down alternative voices when you don't even know if the voice you're ascribing to is the right one. That's what I think is really sort of problematic for me. I know there are always going to be people in professions who don't know what they're talking about. I just wish that those people would be a little bit more humble about their knowledge, their level of knowledge, no matter what field they're in, and then not take the next step to try to silence the dissenters who they don't really even know if they're right or wrong, because they don't actually know if their point of view is right or wrong. And I don't understand how someone can be so ignorant of the studies like you were describing and simultaneously cheerleading for silencing of others. Like, if you're not sure you know what you're talking about, and even then I don't think you should be trying to shut other people down, but especially if you're not sure you know what you're talking about, why would you cheerlead censorship? It just doesn't make any sense.
No sense at all. I often say that in medicine there's more gray than black and white, and beware the absolutist in medicine. I mean, I never talk in absolutist terms. I'm the first person to say even what I'm saying may not be true. Do your own research, get 2 opinions, get 3 opinions. I'm humble enough to say that, but I'm the one who is being censored. But again, coming back to history, you've heard the phrase, haven't you? The best way to follow the science is to follow those who have initially been silenced. We've seen this time and time again. You have entrenched power structures, and the people, we have totally the wrong healthcare leaders right now in this and many countries. And maybe they've only got to those positions by being very arrogant, by being the types of people who are ruthless and career driven. But it's awful, because we're talking about health and well-being, and they are there. And yes, not only are they talking about things which they cannot be sure about, but they're actively trying to censor others. Maybe, as you touched upon earlier, this is a human psychological phenomenon, but it's not right. And in this day and age, we should be calling it out much more.
Okay, last question before we cut the YouTube stream and go into more detail about what was so controversial that you shared on YouTube.
I'm dying to talk about that, so I hope everyone can join us.
Well, there are lots of people who want to know.
Yeah.
Why stay on YouTube? I get that question a lot. Why even stay on YouTube if there's such a pain in the butt to deal with?
A couple of reasons. One is COVID isn't all that I talk about. I feel like I have a lot that I want to talk about and share with people about metabolic health, well-being, lifestyle medicine, which is my main area of interest. I do have my largest following there, and that is currently the biggest platform as well. So the more people, I would rather some people get my message than nobody get my message at all. Plus, I can always direct people over to other platforms, and we don't know whether YouTube will always be like this, as we'll talk about in a bit. Maybe there will be a change in the future, near future, and they'll be held more to account, because this wasn't really an issue even a couple of years ago. This is all new.
Okay. Suneel suffered and still speaks. That makes him a hero. That's our final word for everybody on YouTube. So we'll hopefully see you on ROKFIN and Rumble live, or you can go to all my other platforms. Oh, and you know what? I should give everybody a pitch too, that we're both on Locals, right? So just so that everybody knows, I have my editorial board on Locals posts questions ahead of time for interviews, and Dr. Dan's on Locals as well. So you should follow him, because like he said, when he took his sabbatical from YouTube, he was still posting to Locals. Are you drsuneeldhan.locals.com?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm AllisonMorrow.locals.com. And as you can see, yesterday I posted your video to my community about hello again from Dr. Dan on YouTube. And so I got a bunch of questions for you. So if people, one of the values I think of being in my Locals community is what I try to do is bring the most censored voices on. and then you get to ask them the questions and see if they're full of BS or if you agree with some of the stuff that they're saying. And instead of, you know, the top-down model of news that I was in for a long time, this is a kind of a community news where you can ask the questions of these people directly. So go to AlisonMorrow.locals.com and join my editorial board. All right, we're going to cut the stream on YouTube, and we'll see everybody live on ROKFIN and Rumble. Again, they'll be posted on Odysee and Locals as well later.